These two sky photos were taken less than an hour apart. Play Spot the Difference and you'll notice that some bright dots disappeared. Before you think, oh, stars do that sometimes. Spoiler, they don't. This looks more like a human-made spacecraft passing through the shot. But here's the twist. The photos were taken in 1952, and that's 5 years before we even launched our first object into space. So, what are those dots? Could they be signs of artificial objects made by extraterrestrials? Well, yes, they could. At least that's one of the hypotheses proposed by researcher Beatriz Villarroel at Stockholm University in Sweden. She recently published 2 papers trying to explain these disappearing points of light in photos from the early 1950s, what her team calls transients. So, these are star-like objects of unknown origin that showed up in the first Palomar Observatory sky survey. This was a major astronomy project in California that used a nearly 50-inch telescope that produced almost 2,000 photographic plates of the northern night sky. And there's no denying it, the transients were there. And they were acting weird, disappearing all of a sudden. So scientists had to find an explanation, and that brings us to 4 big hypotheses about what they actually are. Hypothesis number 1. Stars. This is a cool theory because we can actually test it. Go outside tonight and look at the stars. Pay attention to where they are in the sky. Then check again tomorrow night. You might notice that a few stars seem to disappear. But they didn't vanish forever, they're just harder to see. They can get washed out by normal stuff like clouds, haze, humidity, or even bright moonlight. All of that can hide stars from your view for a while, but they'll show up again eventually. So could those transients from the 50s have been stars, and the survey just caught a moment where they seemed to disappear for a sec? You see, astronomers have plenty of things in the sky that look like they vanish. For example, variable stars, whose brightness goes up and down. You've also got supernovae, passing asteroids, and active galaxies that can flare and fade. These changes can happen over minutes, days, or even years. But here's the problem. These transients don't really behave like that. In the old plates, they show up once, and then they're completely missing from images taken both before and after that. I mean, astronomers didn't see them on a blue sensitive plate taken just 30 minutes earlier. They didn't show up on a red sensitive plate taken 6 days later either. Whatever these things were, they were strange because there were so many of them and they were gone so fast. One moment they're there and then they never show up again. That's really odd. So no, they probably weren't stars. What seems more likely is that these flashes were sunlight reflecting off objects orbiting Earth. And that brings us to hypothesis number 2. They were satellites, or some other human-made spacecraft. You've got to remember, this was the 1950s, right when the space race was starting to take over headlines around the world. Everyone wanted to reach space, and they wanted to do it fast. So it's fair to ask, could this have been some kind of early satellite? And the answer is no. The Palomar survey plates were taken before the launch of the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, in 1957, so the timing doesn't really work, and that makes the human-made object theory pretty hard to support. Which brings us to hypothesis number 3, extraterrestrial objects. Yep. Something like an aircraft or a satellite, but made by a highly advanced civilization out there. Something that could have been flying around back then, maybe even watching us, and then for some reason never landed on Earth. It's a wild theory. But when you look at how strange these transients are, you can see why some people take this idea seriously. One thing I didn't tell you is that not all the bright dots were perfect little circles. Sometimes they showed up as straight lines or thin bands. Other times they looked sharp, almost star-shaped. And here's the weird part. Patterns like that can happen when light reflects off something with a flat surface. A regular space rock like an asteroid usually wouldn't have flat, manufactured-looking faces like that. So the study raises the possibility that something artificial might have been up there before humans even started launching spacecraft. And here's where it gets even stranger. These transients showed up around the same time as a bunch of old reports of strange objects in the sky. That same number in 1952, and a lot of people claimed they saw unusual flying objects over Washington, D.C. And it wasn't just one or two sightings. The U.S. Air Force recorded a total of 717 reports during that period. That's a pretty wild coincidence, but extraterrestrial tech might not be the final answer. Some scientists lean toward a fourth hypothesis: human experiments. These newer studies suggest there could be a link to things happening down on Earth. In fact, more than half of the transients showed up the day after nuclear tests. One idea is that the flashes could have been debris from those tests getting thrown high up into the atmosphere. But this theory isn't perfect either. The transients left streaks on the images during the 50-minute exposure. And for that to make sense, the debris would have to stick around and stay concentrated in roughly the same spot for about 24 hours to match what we see. That's really hard to believe, if not basically impossible. Out in space, something doesn't stay fixed over one location for a full day unless it's being actively controlled. So for now, scientists still need more evidence before this can be the main explanation. Well, it kind of feels like we're out of hypotheses, right? And now you see why these transients are still such a big mystery. But there's a group of scientists who think the explanation might be way simpler than it sounds. They think it could all come down to a bad photo. I know, that's not exactly thrilling, but hear me out. We're talking about old images from the 1950s. And you don't have to be an expert to know that back then, sky photos were nothing like what we can capture today. These images were recorded on photographic plates. Basically, they were glass plates coated with a light-sensitive layer, used long before digital cameras to capture the night sky. For their time, it was a big deal. It meant astronomers could store what they saw instead of drawing it by hand. But those plates had problems. They were sensitive, they could get damaged, and the images weren't nearly as clean as what we get with modern digital sensors. These plates can have issues like scratches and tiny defects in the light-sensitive coating. The digitizing process can also add things that weren't really supposed to be in the image. Suddenly, you're seeing a bright dot that could actually be, I don't know, saliva? It turns out humidity can leave marks on photographic plates too. And if a scientist sneezed near a plate at some point, for example, that could have left a weird trace in the image. So if someone handled them badly decades ago, that could leave odd traces in the image. And researchers point out that some of the faintest transients show up in areas of the plates that look contaminated. To completely rule out this hypothesis, they need to inspect the original plates under a microscope. The problem is, the researchers don't have access to the originals. They're working with digitized copies. Still, Villarroel isn't fully convinced it's all just image errors. She says some of these transients line up in ways that are just too unlikely to be random. So the idea now is to keep digging into this with a project called ExoProbe. The goal of the program is to build a network of telescopes that will scan the sky for quick, sudden flashes of light. And if these transients are real, we might not have to wait much longer to find out.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.